Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Spilling the Tea on GovCon. I'm Teresa Moon, Vice President of Communications and Marketing for Parabolis. We are the preeminent partnership for government contractors, providing holistic support that includes a line of credit to fund your growth. The purpose of this podcast is to assist you and small businesses with success in the federal marketplace by introducing them to industry experts and resources that they may not otherwise know about. Today, we welcome Carol Ann Logue, Executive Director of the Florida Photonics Cluster. I met Carol Ann in my earliest days navigating government contracting in the Orlando market, and I can testify to her tireless work across multiple disciplines, supporting mission-critical capabilities that directly support the warfighter. I'm so excited to have you on the show today. Welcome, Carol Ann.
Thank you, Teresa. It's great to be collaborating with you again. And thank
Absolutely.
you for having me on in this old but new role in a lot of ways. And I'll explain that.
That's right. You have been around in the Orlando market and, like I said, multiple areas. I'm excited to dive into your new endeavor here because I know that you're very excited about it. So I'd love to jump in and talk specifically about the fact that you spent much of your career working at the intersection of innovation, academia, and industry. What drew you to the photonics and technology ecosystem and the work you're doing today at the Florida Photonics Cluster?
When I came to University of Central Florida back in really, it's been almost 23 years ago, I was recruited here from the University of Florida, where I had been working extensively with federal labs, NASA, some Department of Defense, Department of Energy, some other universities as well, and their tech transfer and commercialization. And I certainly encountered or worked with companies that were in the optics and photonics industry. But it was really when I came to UCF that I was able to be really immersed much more in the industry because of UCF's international preeminence in the field. And just fascinating history behind that as there is behind the whole industry. As part of the University of Central Florida Business Incubation Program, which I was recruited here to help run and to grow, we always had companies in the program that were spinning out of UCF or were spinning out of other companies in the area that were working in optics and photonics and lasers. So it really was coming to Orlando that got me deeply immersed in the field, and I have been part of the Florida Photonics Cluster as a board member for the past 10 years, representing the incubation program and helping support the organization in various ways.
I love that. And I love how it all fits together. As you know, I'm a native Orlando resident. And so I'm super proud of what we do here. And so I love the fact that you've been able to touch so many areas and the level of impact that our area provides to the industry as a whole. And so I think this might be an area, though, especially in photonics, that a lot of people might not be familiar with. It might be a term that they might be hearing. They might be able to apply their capabilities to the ecosystem as a whole. So I'd love it for our listeners that are tuning in today who may not be familiar, if you can explain a little bit about what the Florida Photonics Cluster is and the role it plays in supporting the industry.
Sure. I'm going to back up a little bit and say that every individual listening to this call is very familiar with optics and photonics and lasers. They just don't know it. We as humans are born as an optical instrument. There's a reason that main nerve in our eyes is called an optical nerve. Think about it. Optics has everything to do with seeing and vision, which has everything to do with light and how light interacts with our eyes. If you wear glasses or contacts, you're wearing optical instruments. If you have ever used a camera, you've used an instrument driven by optics. Our lives are full of applications of optics in the form of various photonic devices. And I'll distinguish between those two terms because I think that's helpful too.
Mhm.
Optics, I like to say, this is going to be a very simplistic explanation. So if anybody in the industry is listening, don't cringe too much. Optics is really the science of light, the fundamental physics and mechanics of how light works. Photonics is the application, if you will, of light in various instruments and sensors and lenses and crystals and all sorts of components. Then we have lasers, which is controlling that light beam in a wide range of ways to be useful and powerful and impactful, whether it's welding, whether it's defense, whether it's the, all sorts of things that lasers are used for, medical procedures and that sort of thing. So I
Mhm.
think that's kind of the simplest way. And I could give many examples of how in our daily lives, if you use a remote control for anything, you're using photonics.
Wow.
If you're using the facial recognition on your phone,
Mhm.
you're using optics and photonics. If you ever used a microscope, as I said, so the backup camera, on your car, if you've ever put on a augmented or virtual reality headset or the new AI glasses, you're using photonics. It's just really everywhere around us. In fact, the very ability for us to be on this podcast virtually using the internet connection
Mhm.
is because of fiber optics, cables, and communication. The world around us would be very primitive without optics and photonics and lasers. And we just really don't realize it, like so many things around us, right?
I appreciate you breaking it down like that, though. I know that some of those that are deeply ingrained in the environment might think that the simplistic nature of it isn't doing it justice, but it allowed for me to be able to really see into how all encompassing it is in our everyday life. And I think that's a
Mhm,
great segue into really discussing in terms of real world applications, particularly in federal and defense and space.
mhm,
Where do we see it particularly showing up in those areas? Because I know there's a lot nationwide of small businesses that are engaging in the federal marketplace that have capabilities that might be included in these realms. Where are we seeing them show
mhm,
up most?
mhm. Well, and if you don't mind, Teresa, I'm going to back up a little bit
Hmm.
and just really emphasize that in many ways, the fact that we have the extraordinary industry across the country that we have in optics and photonics and lasers, and specifically the history behind the really four main clusterings geographically in the country. Certainly the Orlando area, Arizona, around the university there, Rochester, New York, which was really the earliest, and now Montana, was really all driven by the establishment and the extraordinary growth of this industry in the US and really around the world was largely driven by the defense and space industries. And that was really in the 1950s and the 1960s. I'll use the history of the cluster in Florida, in Central Florida in particular, and UCF as a great example. And this story is pretty analogous to what happened in Arizona and Montana. New York, Rochester, which is the earliest, really exists largely because back in the 20s and 30s, you had Kodak,
Hmm.
you had the predecessor to Xerox, you had the predecessor to Bosch and Lomb. So that was the inspiration for that. But here in Orlando, back in the 50s, in the early 60s, we were in the middle of the Cold War. NASA was over there on the Cape doing their thing, and then they were told, "You're gonna send men to the moon and bring them back." NASA, the Department of Defense, the Martin Marietta Corporation specifically over on the
Hmm.
west side of town, were already working and optics and photonics to enable so much of what they were tasked to do, particularly on defense and national security. Missiles, guided missiles, weapon systems are heavily dependent on optics and photonics. Early days of laser weapon systems, which today, if you've been listening to the news around the conflict in Iran, laser weapon systems being deployed. By the way, those of you out there in the gold that may be thinking about trying to help participate in the Golden Dome project, that will be built on optics and photonics and high energy laser weapon systems primarily. But going back to the early days here in Orlando and how we see it showing up, missiles, the immersive technology that we're so well known for in this industry, wearable devices that are being developed, training and simulation are heavily based on the use of photonic devices, particularly sensors, increasingly around quantum computing as that starts to be implemented, which is very dependent on semiconductors being able to process extraordinarily faster, which is only going to happen because of silicon photonics innovations, which, by the way, those listeners that may not know, we have a deep and growing semiconductor cluster here in Orlando, in Osceola County, in Neo City.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of defense work going on that is, it's just all being integrated and heavily driven by the space and defense industry. We know, those of us that live here know, we have a growing presence of Space Force, and the Space Force that components that are out at Patrick Space Force Base in Cape Canaveral are part of absolutely every launch that happens over there, whether it's government, whether it's commercial. And we know we're on track for a couple of hundred or more launches a year. Satellite communications are dependent on optics and photonics because of laser communication, ground to space communication. Space defense is increasingly going to be dependent on laser weapon systems, space-based laser fiber optic communication. So it really just shows up across the board, whether it's sighting systems and weapons or even training systems for weapons firing. Anything that enables our warfighter to see and to track in the field, whether it's in live combat or in training, is based on optics and photonics. So that's just kind of a
I love that. And there's so much talk. I mean, even for someone like me who to call myself a layperson in this scenario is taking it lightly to a different extreme. But I am super proud of the innovations that come out of the Central Florida area, particularly as it is applied to the space program. And I know that this is obviously an area that you've spent many years dedicating time and energy into elevating businesses that are supporting these missions. And so I'd love for you to discuss a little bit about the collaboration between industry, because you talked a lot about, we've got the private and the public sector that are all working towards a similar mission. And so how does that collaboration between industry, academia, and government contribute to the accelerating innovation in the space innovation in particular, but overall here, how important is that? I know that you've done a ton of work with bringing everyone together, and really that's how everyone gets enlightened about what's new. And you've had many engagements in former positions that you've held and bringing small businesses into innovation, meetings where they can bring right to the people who are going to be interested in it and providing solutions for different things. How important is it that each academic, industry, and government are collaborating for the acceleration in this portion of our industry?
It is the foundation. It's the three cornerstones, really, of any strong and established cluster in any industry. The cluster here in Central Florida, again, is really built on all three components, the Martin Marietta Corporation, the University of Central Florida, and NASA and the Department of Defense. So from the very beginning, you had all three sectors recognizing the need for the others.
Mhm.
The federal government has funds to pay for work to be done to solve problems. They're the ones, they articulate their needs. They're going to uptake those solutions to use them. Fundamental research and applied research. Yes, industry does a lot of that, but that really is where academia is so critical. But industry pulls that out of there to
Mhm.
then embody it into products and services that the government and others can use. And workforce, so critical, that
Mm.
training and education of every level in the workforce pipeline,
Mhm.
whether it's technicians, bachelor's degrees, master's degrees, PhDs, certifications of various sorts. By the way, I will just point out that University of Central Florida was the first university in the country to have a dedicated College of Optics and Photonics and established the first PhD program in optics and photonics in the
Oh, wow.
country, even though it's probably one of the younger clusters, but that just tracks with those of us that live here, the pace and scale of the growth that we've seen over the
Mhm.
last 30, 40, 50 years here, in particularly defense and space. So whether it's medical,
Mhm.
you need that academic, industry, and government component, whether it's defense, whether it's maritime, environmental,
Mhm.
all these areas that are so critical on technology innovation. It really is so important that you have all three components. Government can play a particularly critical role in, we think about funding, right? We
Mhm.
think about problems and needs and being a customer base, but standards and regulatory
Yep.
guidelines that come down from the federal government also are really critical drivers as well.
I love hearing about UCF being the first to offer this type of technology as a degree program. It's my alma mater, so, and I never
Yeah.
shy away from getting on my soapbox about Orlando and UCF, and so I love that you brought that to the forefront too. That makes me really proud. I'd like to talk a little bit about, though, in particular, the FPC, the Florida Photonics
Mhm.
Cluster,
Yep.
and helping companies grow and collaborate and enter
Yep.
into the space, because there are people that are listening right now that might not have ever heard of the fact that this is here, that there are places throughout the United States, if they're not local to the Central Florida
Yep.
area. How can they really get engaged so that they can grow within the fields that are really identified with the organization?
Thank you for asking that question. So the Florida Photonics Cluster was established about 30 years ago as organization with a different name initially, but really driven by the companies that were spinning out of Martin Marietta, Glen Martin, starting to spin out of the University of Central Florida, and the need, like in many industry sectors, for companies to come together, to learn together, to connect, to share best practices, to find ways to collaborate and address issues that they might be having. And wherever you may be and listening to this podcast in the country, particularly in Arizona, New York, New Jersey a little bit, Montana, Florida, and even if you're not in one of those areas, I would encourage you, if you are working in any industry, which you are, if you're working in industry, every industry is a consumer of optics and photonics and lasers
Mhm.
in some way or other. So you may not be working in a company that develops optical photonic devices or works hands-on with lasers, you but you may be with a company that's developing and commercializing products that use those components. And increasingly, what we're seeing in the Florida Photonics Cluster is companies that are joining that are just that. They're not the core industry producing the optical photonics and laser devices and components. They are companies that use those
Mhm.
or serve those industries, whether it's laser safety, whether it's manufacturing, even legal and financial. I mean, these are
Mhm.
businesses, so they need all the standard
Right.
business services, right? Not just the technical services at
Right.
all. They need marketing and branding and visibility support. But primarily, it really is a benefit to those companies that are looking to connect with the sources of the innovation, to stay aware of and abreast of the latest innovations in optics and photonics and lasers, to integrate into their products and services, and partner with the universities or the companies that are producing those. We have a good number of our members in the cluster that aren't in Florida. They're headquartered outside the state,
Mhm.
but they may have customers in Florida or they want customers in Florida because of the industry demographics of Florida and the really interesting mix of key industries that we have. We've talked about space and defense, but maritime, we have a lot of coastline, right?
Yep.
So there are a lot of coastal science issues, maritime, environmental, like many places in the world and the country, water's an issue, environmental is an issue because of the extraordinary growth of the population and land development. Entertainment, in the entertainment industry, yes, Orlando is known primarily around the world for our theme parks,
Mhm.
but I always make sure I say that you don't go to those theme parks and have those extraordinary experiences without that is all due to extraordinary innovation and technology. When you think about the complexity and the
Mhm.
technology innovation in those rides, those experiences that you have, a great deal of that is optics and photonics in particular. So it really is all driven by communications, obviously,
Yeah.
across the board. As we
Mhm.
move into 6G communication, more and more wireless, certainly AI,
Yep.
certainly wireless. So it's just no matter what industry you're in, I encourage you to get involved and stay informed
Yep.
and you'll find potential collaborators and partners, both in industry and academia and government.
I love that you've mentioned all of the above, that it really is an all-encompassing environment, and I think a lot of businesses that are listening are looking for organizations that have that sort of "you're all welcome" because everyone's using it, so even though you might not be creating it or providing it, you're utilizing it, so there are businesses that you're gonna wanna meet, and we'll have possible collaborative opportunities with them. And so I definitely want to talk with you offline about how we can get involved to support that and bring it to mainstream a
Mhm,
little bit more. Because I think after listening to everything that you said, it's so important that people have a good understanding about what the cluster itself is providing to the actual ecosystem of the businesses that are supporting it. But these outside businesses that could be
mhm,
possibly engaging in collaboration there on every level is super important. And just another way, while businesses are looking to diversify, a great way for
mhm.
them to find out more information and how they can get involved. And so, with that being said, I know that you guys have some upcoming programming and initiatives for 2026. So, which of those should everyone be aware of, and how can they get
Mhm.
involved, me included? Because this has been really eye opening for me. And now I don't feel as intimidated by it, the subjects, because
Good.
I'm
That
sure
was the
I'm not
goal.
the only one that was like, I have no idea what that means. And so, we need to get off our high horse sometimes and understand that you're not supposed to know everything. But I've really learned a lot today, and I want to get more involved. And so,
Good.
what can we
We
expect for
need you.
2026, and how can we get engaged?
Yeah, well, the easiest way to get engaged and stay informed is to join the cluster, and
Mhm.
membership's not that expensive. You just go to floridaphotonics.org, check out the join page, and you'll see several categories. One for those that are actual manufacturers of optical, photonics, and laser devices, one for affiliate members, which are those that are not in that manufacturing category. We do have a student membership category as well, and then an academic and government category, because we have quite a few government and other universities that are part of the cluster as well. We're very active on LinkedIn in particular, not so active on other social media yet, but follow us on LinkedIn. That's one of the best ways to stay connected. We are growing our contact list and would be happy to add anyone to that list. In terms of what's coming up, beyond the 3 events we've already had this year, one was an in-person networking event, which we do quarterly, that brings together our members that are in a particular geographic area of the state, usually includes a tour of one of our member companies, and just some great networking, often with another relevant organization. The one we did in March was with the Manufacturers Association of Central Florida. We've
Mm-hmm.
done a webinar about the value of membership and what you can get out of the cluster. Yesterday, we just did a webinar in partnership with the Arizona, Montana, and New York clusters and the Bird Foundation out of Israel to provide information about the funding program that the Bird Foundation has open for proposals
Mm-hmm.
to fund collaborations between a U.S. company and an Israeli company in an R&D project. So check out the Bird Foundation, and we have the recording. We should be getting the recording to that webinar from the Bird Foundation pretty soon, and we'll post that on our YouTube channel. But coming up through the rest of the year, we're going to be doing webinars on the semiconductor industry, the biophotonics industry. By the way, Central Florida is becoming a real leader in biophotonics because the whole medical industry is certainly a key area of
Mm-hmm.
application for optics and photonics in many ways.
Mm-hmm.
And again, UCF's a key driver in that with a lot of companies involved. We'll be doing one on quantum computing. We're going to be doing one on workforce pipeline. Those are the key ones. I have a long list of topics, so we
I
may
love
throw some
it.
others in there. Yeah.
I think the best thing, like you said, is for them to link up with you all on LinkedIn,
Yep.
go to your
Mhm.
website and become a member, or at least become a
Yep.
part of your distribution list so they can get more
Yep.
information, so that they get more
Yep.
encouraged to become a member. And you can count on us at Parabolas to start sharing with our network and our client base, because I think this is a great organization that people can get involved in no matter where they are in the United States. And so
Agreed.
I really
Thank you
appreciate
so
you
much.
not only coming on today, but for breaking it down in a digestible way where someone like me can understand it.
Good.
That is that that's perfect marketing there. So, so all can understand is what makes it more inviting. If you talk too far over people's head, you don't make it as welcoming, and you always do a great job of that. And so I really
Thank you.
appreciate your time
It's
today.
been so much fun. Appreciate it, Teresa.
We're going to have you back on because there's going to be a lot of things that I'm going to
Okay.
be learning now that I'm going to get involved, and we'll have you on to explain more because you did a wonderful job today. And
Wow, love it. I'll bring one of our, maybe bring somebody from UCF or one of our
excellent.
companies if it's given, depending on the topic. So we can have a
Love
lot of
that.
fun talking about a whole lot of things.
That's fantastic. And so, once again, grateful for your time today. And I wish you all the best in the year ahead. And thank you all for joining us. As always, we pride ourselves on sharing the most insightful and exciting people and information to help you better navigate your GovCon journey. If you like what you heard today, you can see all of our past podcasts, which are archived on our Parabolas YouTube channel. Stay tuned for all of our future guests in the coming months as we help you grow to great heights in the year ahead. I'm Teresa Moon, and this is Spilling the Tea on GovCon. Have a great day, my friends.
Thank you.